Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Hawkeye Speaks. Hope you're doing well today. Today we're going to take a minute to discuss a bit about woodworking and masculine and feminine energy. Start off this little chat with a bit of a joke. What came first, the chicken or the egg? The reason why this is a bit of a joke is that I was just thinking about it, and the chicken and the egg, these are both distinctly feminine forms. The chicken obviously is the female of the animal. It doesn't say what came first, the chicken or the rooster, the chicken or the egg. And the egg is the quintessential form of the feminine, essentially, of implosion energy, right? What came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, then the obvious answer to this, and you kind of frame it in that way, is that what came first is the feminine. And we have a narrative in the West. Perhaps it's a deistic hangover, as Segall says. But this idea that the word is the creator and the word is distinctly masculine. And that may in fact be true, that somehow the outward projection, the phallus, the act, is masculine in a way. And this is, like I say, a deistic hangover that in fact the idea of the masculine, the phallus, the word, the act being turned into not just the initiation of creation type of energy, but perhaps creator itself. And that's quite a stretch. I want to just start off this little discussion by advising everyone that we're going to be digging into the feminine and accentuating the importance of the feminine in our developing of our own system of the mind, being mindful. Are you all familiar with Gabe Brown? I want to also introduce you to a couple people as we get started here. Gabe Brown is currently kind of America's most popular regenerative agriculture spokesperson. I'm sure you've heard about regenerative agriculture, where we regenerate lands instead of depleting them as we produce foods, which is a growing movement. Thankfully, it's a largely growing movement, and people are talking about soil health all over the place in different realms. But as I said, our number one spokesman in America is Gabe Brown. Gabe is a nice guy. I've met him. Great story. Perfect person to have as a spokesman for the movement. And just as I would say with Rachel Carson, I mean, hopefully everyone read the book Silent Spring. I did not read that book as an adolescent. I read it more recently in my adult life. But one of the things I realized about that book and the woman, Rachel Carson, is that she's an American icon. The book Silent Spring is a true piece of American heritage. Just like A Sand County Almanac by Aldo Leopold. I mean, Aldo Leopold is a real American hero. And it's time where, America, the United States, we've been here long enough that we can start to, build our Mount Rushmore with some more reasonable characters, perhaps, than the ones that are placed up there, as far as shaping the geist of the spirit of the times. So Gabe Brown has a book called From Dirt to Soil, and his story is about his ranch. They transitioned towards regenerative in 1994, and they stopped using tillage and so on and so forth. Great story. Check it out. Please familiarize yourself with Gabe Brown, and also read the book Silent Spring by Rachel Carson. But why I wanted to introduce Gabe Brown in this discussion is that Gabe Brown starts, at least he was, starting off every talk, his lecture series, his speaking tours, starting off every single talk with the same quote. The same few quotes, but this one in particular. And I'm not sure of the original author of this quote, but I will share it with you now. If you want to make small changes, change the way you're doing things. If you want to make great changes, change the way you're seeing things. Now, I find this to be a very profound quote, and it ties into this idea that we cannot change the world by changing what we're doing, which is paradoxical. We would think upon an initial assessment that it is quite necessary that we change what we're doing. And in fact, I think it is. I think that's a reasonable assumption. But that might be the masculine assumption. And let's incorporate some feminine here. If we change what we're doing, but not change what we're thinking, we're always still trapped within the initial thought paradigm, the blueprint that we are operating under. These presumptions of how the world works. So, and once we state that, what I believe is an obvious fact, we can see that our ability to change what we're doing becomes limited by what we're thinking, how we believe that the world works. And, in many cases, it is quite necessary, actually, that we change the way we're seeing the world, change the way that we are perceiving to actually affect real change, to be able to see the changes that need to be made and to enter into them in a way that brings other life along with us instead of us interjecting our opinions or something like that. And of course I'm speaking in the form of action here, but we want to have actions that are reciprocated in nature. If they're positive, if they're actions that we feel are ecologically positive, we would like to see them reciprocated and not just die out. So how do we really make effectual change? And I'm suggesting that this is a very powerful quote and a good starting place to consider that it may in fact be necessary that we change the way we are seeing the world. Okay, that we go in instead of going out to start with. All right. So we're going to talk a bit about woodworking this morning. This is going to be just about a half an hour chat. I'm not going to go on too long here, but I'm going to introduce you to two fundamentally different theories in woodworking, which is going to tie directly into this quote that Gabe Brown uses. If you want to make great changes, change the way you're seeing things. Okay. In woodworking, there are fundamentally two different ways that we could approach a project of working with wood. One is with the pencil and the paper. I don't have a set of plans in front of me here, just a little couple numbers for a step that I was building. But you're all familiar with this schema, okay? The schema, it kind of starts in here with what perception of the environment, what needs to be created, and then the design happens in here, transferred to here, okay? Processed. The thought becomes processed, rationalized, okay? Schematicized. The measurements have to be there. The cut list has to be formed before we can start cutting the boards. We can draw. You don't have to be an excellent artist to draw in 3-dimension in some rudimentary sense. Okay, but anyway, you get what I'm saying here. In one type of woodworking, we start with an idea. I want to build this cabinet. I want to build this chair. I want to turn a vase. It doesn't have to be a very linear thing. It could be an organic thing, but still it starts with the idea, okay? Now, on the fundamentally other side, and now I'm not setting up a dialectic here to encourage binary thinking, but rather, as in with all of my discussions here, I want to encourage a continuum, between the two, that we're not encouraging binary thinking, that it's either this or this, but that everything in life is operates with these continuums, and there's not really a fine line in between. But there are two fundamentally different approaches here that we're discussing. One, in woodworking, we start with the design, okay, and then we source material to fit that design. And the opposite is called the Krenov school of cabinet making. James Krenov is an individual that we can credit with this way of approaching the material wood, but we can also just acknowledge it as an entire camp in itself. Okay, and perhaps we can delineate it as the feminine approach to woodworking. Okay, so in the one, we start with the design, and in this other, what we do, in the Krenov school of cabinet making, what you will actually do is approach the material and ask it what it wants to be. We'll take a board, we'll go out, this is a very plain piece of wood here, this is a piece of maple, and it's not an interesting board with a lot of character to it, so in that way it's not the best example for what I'm explaining to you, but in other ways it may be, because as a woodworker, someone with reverence for wood, we will always set aside pieces that have good potential, and instead of just throwing this in the fireplace, for instance, or making it, adding it into a pile of shingles or something, that would just be absolutely inappropriate. We know this is a very dense piece of wood. It's very strong and stable. Okay, it has a very straight grain to it. So this piece of wood has been set aside in my wood shop because it may want to become parts, pieces, little gears or handles or something, and it certainly does not want to become a piece of firewood. It's a beautiful piece of wood. So if I were to start a project by picking up this piece of wood and asking it what it wants to be, all right, it's a fundamentally different approach than starting with the design on a piece of paper, all right? And an interesting thing about this other side of the spectrum is that the body keeps the score. That's a great book by Bessel Van Der Kolk. But I really love the title of that book, The Body Keeps the Score, because it talks about how morphology determines form. I mean, if you study Denis and Rupert Sheldrake and some of these folks that are focused on the third way in evolution, that was not neo-Darwinism, genetic determinism, and also not creationism. There's a third way that does take into account the intentions of the organism. What we see is that our ability to create new forms is limited by the forms that exist, and it is also encapsulated within our perception of the environment. So, as we can see, if I were to take the feminine approach to working with this piece of wood, I still am only going to be able to kind of then, in the masculine sense, create with it what has already been predestined. All right, and this is where we can see that if you want to make significant changes, you have to change the way you're seeing things and open yourself up to more potential. If I can only see before and after, within this whole process, if I could only see in a limited way that this board could become a box, that it has 4 pieces here, it needs to be cut this way, and you see what I'm getting at? That would be a very limited, linear type of thinking that and you would see, if that's what I did with this piece, you would see, oh, that guy only knows how to make a box with that. Another person may have only made spoons with wood or spatulas, and they may, of course, we can get 5 spoons out of this and 1 spatula. Well, but you would see how if we were to investigate their thinking or someone using that procedure, that they are obviously limited by seeing only spoons in this piece. All right? But to have a truly feminine approach is to be open, to be the vessel. All right? And I don't know, how do women feel about that confining of the feminine into a definition of the vessel? Does that mean, is that an offensive thing to say to women that makes a woman feel like, oh, you're just a receptacle for the man's stuff? But I want to suggest that actually the vessel, what carries the form, or the vast potential of forms, is the most important aspect in life, okay? To me, I'm making this talk in part to honor the feminine in the utmost, with the utmost of respect. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Oh, they're both the feminine. And the feminine carries the form, the vessel, all right? It doesn't matter how many new possibilities, how many strikes with the hammer on the hot iron that the masculine can make. It is the iron itself that determines what it can be. Okay, the feminine does determine the range of possibilities because the vessel holds these. All right. So, like I was saying, we could see if one woodworker looked at this board, tried to engage in this feminine process and looked at it and said, this could only be a box, or this can only be spoons. And you can see how that's, we could look at that and say, oh, that person has only spoons in their mind, or only, okay. And then the truly feminine approach would be to look at the material and then to take it into the context of the environment. What do we need? What needs to be created right now? And this is why it's a critical step to consider that if we only focus on the masculine, the creation, and we're not open to the vessel, what needs to be received and held onto, then we could just make all kinds of useless stuff to no end. I mean, I've used the two examples of box and spoon, but this could be made into any useless, number of small things. But this board has the potential to become something that is very needed on the homestead. And we understand as the woodworker, I understand the properties of this piece of wood. I understand the potential. Okay, and then I'm receptive to the needs of the environment through the means of observation and listening, and forming relationships with what's going on around me. And then in that way, I can be more receptive to what this can be and wants to be, all right? And I can bring the intention of all the intentions into one picture, the egg, basically, okay? So there are two fundamentally different types of woodworking. One in which we start with the plan and idea, and one in which we start with an observation of the material. So, now, like I said, I'm not going to go on too long with this particular talk about the feminine. I'll show you these two chairs here and make sure this is still recording. All right, these chairs, that's my very first chair right there. In a way, these two chairs were like my PhD project in woodworking. You can see I'm an accomplished woodworker. These are some of my sculptures. That pedestal I made probably 20 years ago. And that maple turning on the top there, that was from a piece of wood that one of my fellow instructors at Santa Fe Community College gave me. And in turn, I gave him a beautiful carving mallet that I made. That was a really nice exchange to have met that gentleman. Ivan Dimitrov, I believe is his name. Amazing sculptor. All right, but these two chairs are each built from a single board. With the exception of those front legs. Okay, so there was two boards. They were each about 8 feet long. And as you might be able to see, if you look at the seat, that there was a cup, a cup in the board. And the boards were not perfectly straight. All right, and I milled these boards with my own sawmill, actually. I don't know if I cut that tree down. But I did mill that log with my own sawmill. And one of the examples that I had thought about using with these two approaches in woodworking is that in one instance, you can see if we were in like an urban setting, let's say we're in a cabinet shop in a city, we have to crank out some cabinets and we're getting our materials, our wood delivered by the pallet load, we're not particularly going to use that feminine investigatory process with the material. We're going to just have to crank out the cut list and cut up the material, all right? But if we are on a homestead where we have milled our own wood, we have a limited amount of wood and a limited amount of things that need to be created as well. The kitchen is smaller, the chairs, we only need a few chairs, and so on and so forth. So you can see how in that case, on the homestead, it's quite beneficial that we use the feminine aspect in our creative processes. because we want to know, what does the material want to be? We don't have hundreds of these boards. We had 2 of them, So you can see the importance of asking the material, what does it want to be? And again, back to the story of these chairs, I had intended on making a bench with the chairs for years. I thought, they were just 2 long natural edge boards that seemed like they wanted to be a bench. But it was never materializing. It wasn't happening. The boards were sitting around for years and years, and the bench was not coming to fruition. And finally, I decided to do something different and to change the way I was seeing things, to ask the boards what they wanted to be. And when I took that different approach and just said, hey, what do you guys want to do? They said, we want to be chairs. I mean, not literally, I didn't receive any communication in words from the boards, but I received a feeling when I thought about it, that these boards would like to be these chairs, and this design came to me as part of it. Okay, so back to what I was saying, the body keeps score. I mean, there was no new form that could be created outside of my ability as the woodworker. Okay, so I've already fostered the ability to carry out some new design potential. I've already honed the skills for many, many years. You can see that that's a kind of a necessary piece of it, the practice. All right. So the skills were there to do something different, but the inspiration wasn't yet. And then when I let the board speak to me, this new design even emerged. So it wasn't just that they wanted to be something different than just a bench. They had the potential to, in conjunction with the masculine, to become something entirely new. I had never seen this design, this K, I call them K chairs, where it's just one board cut into the 3 pieces there and put back together. And the nature of the board, the cupping of it, the slight curvatures that the board had, even its flexibility, here in these finished chairs, the backs are a little bit flexible. The whole chair, you can feel the flex in it just a little bit, which to me, as a woodworker, shows me that we've worked just perfectly within the natural proportions of the material. And I am quite happy with the chairs. I'm quite happy with my choice to listen to the material rather than to impose that decision of becoming a bench just because they were 2 boards. Alrighty, so I guess I'm going to leave it there. Friends, thanks for tuning in. I want to encourage everyone to look inside. Time was not counted from daylight, but from midnight. All right, this idea that the real place to go and to find newness, it's not outside of ourselves, it's within ourselves. It is the feminine. What came first, the chicken or the egg? Thanks for tuning in, everyone.